Actually, have I been muted this whole time? God dang it. I may have been muted this whole time. Oh no, I forgot to hit another button. We're doing too much. We're doing too much. All right, let me real quick do a quick another introduction and just in case. But yeah, welcome everyone. Dregn Durant here of the S800088. We are exploring the world of artificial intelligence as it becomes a hot topic in the creative world. And myself, coming from a more technical background, coming from the I guess you can call it the business slash corporate world, and having left that space, becoming a VTuber slash streamer for the past year, we're exploring various new topics and trying to look at, although it is long form, 1 hour or so videos that we're trying to focus and fine tune towards. These are some interesting topics that I enjoy and am interested in, and I enjoy meeting in the middle and trying to identify, mixing the waters and having that conversation between the technical and this creative world that I am now kind of have one foot into, right? So, darn, I was muted. But if you're new to the channel and you like this type of stuff, leave a comment, hit the button. Welcome everyone watching live and hanging out. And obviously, if you're watching this on YouTube afterwards, we welcome you. And of course, our favorite lurkers that are out there as well. So what are we doing today? In episode 5, which we're kicking off now, we've done a few of these now. We've played with various AI tools such as Midjourney. We've looked at ChatGPT. If you've been following my Twitter, you would have seen kind of the blending of those technologies and me also leveraging Azure text to speech to make some, at least injecting a little bit of my, I suppose, the limited amount of my creativity into leveraging these tools and trying to make something a bit more unique, a bit more of an experience rather than a product that AI just spits out there, right? So yeah, what we're gonna do today is take a look at a video that I had found, because over the past 2 weeks I've been just trying to take in as much of this AI related conversation, especially when it comes to the creative side of things, right? And AI artwork, for example, has been a hot topic for the past month. So as I was exploring and watching just hours and hours and hours of different podcasts, different artists, their takes on AI, their concerns, their optimism, how they're using it, what they're using it for, if they're even using it at all, right? The ethics behind it. Well, through a podcast, which I might share a little later because they talk about a few good topics from the video we're about to see, as well as a presentation that was done at Lightbox Expo, which they had a very, very senior and well-known artist, allegedly. I'm not, again, I've only been aware of this kind of creative space for the past maybe year and a half, 2 years. So I'm fairly new to the whole artistic world, right? Coming from technical. But Vox did a very good video that's about little over 13 minutes long, talking about the text-to-image revolution, and they're going to explain it, explore it, and share some information about it. And we also have a few other resources that we might share today with you all. So let's jump into it. We're, again, trying to keep these down to an hour or so. Oh, I'm so mad I muted myself. We're trying to do too much at once. But I'm enjoying these series, and I hope you guys are as well. So yeah, let me know what you think. Let me know if there's any videos or podcasts or creatives that have talked about it that you think I should explore. And maybe I've seen it, maybe I haven't, right? But I want to have that conversation. I think the best way to address it, the best way to steer it in the direction that we want to see, and also just with the new just online ecosystem that's really, really kind of evolving and revolutionizing after the pandemic, where everyone was super connected to the online world. I think things are changing, and I think 2023, 2024, we're going to see kind of a new revolution happening, whether people are really realizing it when they're being churned by it, right? So anyways, that's a topic for another time. Let's drop down and move over and check out this video by Vox. The link to this video is in the description, so if you like it, I don't really follow Vox. I don't really follow a whole lot of these kind of named media outlets of sorts. But if you like it, check it out, see what else they're talking about. And yeah, let's jump into it. So this video here, the title of it is, I don't know. Let's see here. Let's actually switch back. So I don't know if you guys can see it, but title is The Text-to-Image Revolution Explained. I'm going to go ahead and make it full screen so we could all see all of it, and we'll leave the comments, we'll leave the comments off. If you're on YouTube, you can read it on the side, the live replay, if you're interested. But yeah, this is a great introduction to how people are perceiving AI-generated artwork. And there's a few sections where they actually dive a little bit into just a high level of what these AI art training models actually are doing behind the scenes, which I think a lot of the artistic folks, from what I've seen on Twitter, have a pretty warped misconception about, right? Now, obviously, how they're collecting the data to learn is a big question mark. I have an idea for what we're going to talk about when we get to it in maybe a later video. Maybe we'll do that tomorrow or on Wednesday. We'll see. But for now that we've played with these tools, I think it's a great time to jump in and share a little bit about what's actually going on, right? And I think this is a great place to start. So let's check it out. Here we go.
7 years ago, back in 2015, one major development in AI research was automated image captioning. Machine learning algorithms could already label objects in images, and now they learned to put those labels into natural language descriptions. And it made one group of researchers curious. What if you flipped that process around?
Yeah.
Do image to text. Why not try doing text to image as well and see how it works?
So notice right away, Amazon is involved in this, right? And it's not just Amazon, it's a lot of the people in Silicon Valley. For those that have not heard the term Silicon Valley, well, this is the area up in San Francisco, right? Where a lot of the major tech companies are stationed. And there's a future topic that I'll probably introduce another podcast that talks about Silicon Valley in particular, as well as how Silicon Valley differs from something, say, the Eastern Wall Street, for example, right? That's a whole nother conversation and a rabbit hole to dive into. But Silicon Valley is, I think, one of the major pillars that is spearheading and pushing this artificial intelligence evolution and revolution, right? There is various, I guess, from the technical point of view, right? I find a lot of different advancements come from, in a way, science fiction, right? People who are, in a way, nerds who are super passionate about what they're doing. It doesn't have to be like the geeky nerd that we refer to today. It could even be people in the past who were more scientific or, just really invested in technology or the advancement of technology, right? We see a lot of advancements come out of them wanting to make what would be considered fantasy in their time into a reality in the future, right? Which, in hindsight, being 2020, we oftentimes as humans, right, be it with our limited capabilities of our brain, will oftentimes take for granted. But coming from tech, I had enough experience and, I guess, exposure to AI that I'm at least familiar with the speed that technology grows in. And being a big fan of sci-fi, I got a crazy imagination when it comes to space and different crafts and different forms of technology. And, just being I don't know, how should I say it? A fan of that scene, right? So yeah, this so far doesn't surprise me of who's already talking on the screen here, right? And what they're explaining is that, hey, we had models to say, hey, if we can look at a photo and a computer could identify objects in the photo, yeah, let's reverse that process and see if it can be done. And if it can be done, well, we've already seen that they're already starting to do so, right? We often take for granted, for example, that the facial capture from like your cell phone and actually a lot of people in this sphere that I'm involved in, right, is now are VTubers. Well, that technology that allows you to capture your face and do that kind of motion capture, and how we even see, like in the film industry, how motion capture has evolved and how green screen technology has evolved, right? And how a lot of CGI is now kind of computer assisted, for example, is all potentially under this umbrella that is now feeding into the advancement of this artificial intelligence, machine learning driven technologies that now, because it's encroaching into the creative world, we now see a visual representation of what AI is capable of. And I think that's part of the reason why we're seeing this sudden explosion, right? It's no longer just a bunch of stuff that the majority of the layman doesn't care about, like code or advertising, for example. And now it's affecting the people at the ground level, right? If you want to think of it that way. So anyways, let's continue.
It was a more difficult task. They didn't want to retrieve existing images the way Google search does. They wanted to generate entirely novel scenes that didn't happen in the real world. So they asked their computer model for something that it would have never seen before.
Like all the school buses you've seen are yellow, but if you write the red or green school bus, would it actually try to generate something green? And it did that.
Yeah.
It was a 32 by 32 tiny image, and then all you could see is like a blob of something on top of something.
They tried some other prompts, like a herd of elephants flying in the blue skies.
Yep. So this is the early examples.
A toilet seat sits open in the grass field, and a bowl of bananas is on the table. Maybe not something to hang on your wall, but the 2016 paper from those researchers showed the potential for what might become possible in the future. And
here we are.
The future has arrived.
Yep. Now we're hitting this, what do they call it? The term that I heard often when I was watching a lot of these podcasts is, especially coming from, I think, those that have actually delved a bit into the tech side of it, is we're at a launch point, right? We're at this point where now it's something that's gaining, I guess you can call it, critical mass. And from here on, you know, a lot of people who don't understand technology think that it's going to grow in kind of a linear graph that grows and grows and grows over time. But no, it's going to explode exponentially, right? So as far as timelines go, and I'm starting to talk about timelines because I really think a lot of people underestimate the advancements of technology and how technology compounds over itself and grows, right? I forget again the exact metric, but you know, the computers, for example, and I'm unfortunate enough to be old enough to have seen, in a way, the growth of the internet and the growth of, say, video games, and how that technology has come from a simple black screen with some white lines, for example, to having just full set photorealistic, like, warfare environments, right? That we really take for granted today, of just how impressive that technology has come. Well, now we're at a point where artificial intelligence is now capable of not only understanding in one direction and just doing like identification of, hey, what do I see based on like a photograph or like a photo, right? To the point where now AI can actually do live streamed recognition of moving picture. And we actually see this in technologies like, say, Tesla, right? The self-driving vehicles and its ability to identify, you know, where's a stop sign? What does a stop sign look like? Where's a crossroad? What does a crossroad look like? Or what is an intersection? What is a stoplight? What's a green light? What's a red light, right? And when it changes, and doing all of that in real time, right? So by being able to identify and create these kind of plotted, I suppose, correlations, right? Between, hey, I see elephant. Well, if you do that enough times, eventually you can reverse engineer and say, hey, based on your understanding of what an elephant looks like, okay, if I type elephant, what do you think the visual of that should look like? And that's really what they're kind of starting to explore here. And it's again been happening for a good while now, right? I mean, if I scroll down, you'll actually see that this video alone is actually 7 months old. When did you guys all start hearing about AI art? Probably within the past month and a half, right? The majority of people have no idea what's been going on behind the scenes, right? And really just the explosion of it all has been scary for, I think, a lot of people. So yeah, let's see where this goes.
Almost impossible to overstate how far the technology has come in just 1 year.
All agreed. Yeah.
It's been quite dramatic.
People's minds are being blown.
I don't know anyone who hasn't immediately been like, what is this? What is happening here?
Yeah? It's not perfect, but it's crazy.
Watching waves crashing. Okay.
Party hat guy.
Seafoam dreams.
A coral reef.
Cubism.
Caterpillar.
A dancing taco.
My prompt is Salvador Dali painting the skyline of New York City.
You may be thinking, wait, AI-generated images aren't new. You might have heard about this generated portrait going for over $400,000 at auction back in 2018, or this installation of morphing portraits, which sought to be sold the following year.
Frankly, I've never heard about these. So the assumption that people have even heard about this stuff, right? I've heard about it from the tech world when it comes to machine learning, data analytics, cybersecurity, advertising, marketing, right? I've heard of it from that angle. But honestly, for the past probably year, not even for the past year, I mean, when did I start playing with Wombo? I think Wombo was about a year and a half ago. I think I discovered and started playing with, one of the first, or at least in my take, one of the first that I was able to gain access to it and actually dabble with, right? But now we're coming to a point where there's a few technologies that have really blown up, right? Midjourney is the one that we're using to explore on our channel, but yeah, I never knew about this. And maybe if you're not in the art world, you probably never would have known about these types of situations going on, right? So I think it's interesting that they're like, oh, you might have heard about it. And I think most people haven't heard about it. I think it's the other way around.
It was created by Mario Klingemann, who explained to me that that type of AI art required him to collect a specific dataset of images and train his own model to mimic that data.
Let's say, oh, I want to create landscapes, so I collect a lot of landscape images. I want to create portraits. I train it on portraits, but then the portrait model would not really be able to create landscapes.
And same with those hyper-realistic fake faces that have been plaguing LinkedIn and Facebook.
It's not just fake images, but we also see this technology coming a long way to the point where deep fakes, right, have become a thing, right? Being able to recognize facial feature, eye movement, mouth movement, and now being able to use technology to replicate full range motion of generated faces. It's wild. It's absolutely wild, right? And if you're not blown away by it, you underestimate it. Maybe you just don't care. Maybe you just don't want to be involved in it. But yeah, AI it's not even an issue with just the artistic sphere. It's an issue that's going to affect a lot of people. Much like I would argue the introduction of machines to the assembly line, right? Replacing workers putting parts for an engine together, for example. The vast majority of that has changed in manufacturing to machines, right? We don't even think twice today that, say, if you want to make a board game, the vast majority of the board game outside of the art assets themselves are made entirely by machines printing sheets and sheets and sheets of cards and cardboard and then punching them and cutting them. Sure, there's a little degree of like modeling and preparation that needs to be done to create the physical mechanism. But what do you do when it starts encroaching into the digital realm, right? Where there is no real world equivalent that needs to be prepared to make a physical item. Now we're creating digital objects which exist in the digital sphere, which the only limitation really is going to be the machine that is powering this technology, right? So we're coming up to a future where the like data centers, right? We know, for example, like Google has a massive data center. We know Microsoft has massive data centers. We know Amazon has massive data centers. We know other foreign countries that have massive data centers. Those data centers, I think, are going to become super, super, not just important, but I think it's going to become one of the most important resources. And arguably, you know what, it probably has already begun, right? I commented a couple times before about how like Bill Gates, for example, is buying up a bunch of farmland, and Bill Gates, at least as far as I'm aware, is still the largest Western owner of farmland today, which is, that alone is wild to me. At first I thought, maybe it was for the agricultural scene, right? Buying up all the farmland in order to have, these new kind of crop fields, or in order to plant, whatever makes money or whatever people are demanding, or for this kind of green foods, projects that are going on from this kind of global level. But a part of me started thinking, as I explored more of the AI scene, and especially with the big boom happening in the creative world, it's like, shit, I wonder if all this land is being bought up because land is going to be necessary as to house the not only the power generation for these technologies, but also the additional data centers, for example. I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see what actually happens with all this land that is being accumulated by particular tech giants, for example. So yeah, it's a very curious time. But yeah.
Those come from a model that only knows how to make faces.
Yep.
Generating a scene from any combination of words requires a different, newer, bigger approach.
Yeah, now we kind of have these huge models, which
Yeah.
are so huge that
Not just so huge, right? I think anyone who's in the artistic sphere who's looked even a little bit into AI, for example, has heard of, what was it called? Leon 5B, I think, which has something like 5.6 billion records of things that it has scraped off of, the internet. Now, there's the whole ethical conversation around, hey, is it right that they did that? How was it obtained? Is it even, it's not actually even a legal question because, again, I kind of want to save this for a different conversation in a later episode, but a lot of people don't realize that that data most likely was collected legally. That's the big problem that people have. It's like, okay, even if it was collected legally, was it ethical though? Right. And I think that's where a lot of the conversation gets a bit muddied with the general layman, say on Twitter, versus the people who are actually trying to understand, oh, this is a potential risk. How did they do it? Where did it come from? And was it right? Right. Was it handled the right way? Is, I think, the conclusion of the conversation that leads to the next problem that we need to then figure out and solve and figure out the direction of, right? But just to make a quick small point for anyone who's looking at AI as an artist and being like, well, they took my quote unquote copyrighted material or they're stealing my artistic identity or something like that. What a lot of people don't realize is that these models like Leon 5B, and this is also things that I've learned over, the hours and hours that I've begun to consume on the behind the scenes and understanding, hey, okay, how is this affecting the artistic world? Where is this coming from within that artistic sphere? It's that, hey, if you upload your artwork to, say, ArtStation, DeviantArt, maybe even Pinterest, Instagram is actually another good one. Like everybody should know by now that Facebook takes your data. They sell your data. You are the customer, literally, and the product. Literally, right? When it comes to Facebook, guess who owns Instagram? As far as I'm aware, it's still Facebook. Well, a lot of this data on these platforms, if you take a closer look at the terms of service, now I haven't gone and read the pages of that jargon, but I'm willing to bet, just from my experience in business and the technical space, is that much like most people will just scroll to the bottom, hit accept, or hit those couple of check marks that say, hey, I've read your terms of use. I've read I acknowledge the terms of service and whatnot. There is oftentimes going to be some clause in there that says, hey, if you post your stuff here, your data may be collected for research. It may be collected and sold to marketing or advertising agencies for targeted advertisements. A lot of us have been so, God, I guess conditioned, or it's such jargon we just don't want to deal with it, right? Or it's created in a way that incentivizes us to like not understand it or not want to dive deeper into it. A lot of people, unfortunately, have legally signed off their consent to allow this to have happened, and that's something I think is a bit naive in the artistic field, where people are complaining that, hey, where did this data come from? It came from, I didn't give you permission, but through, say, I think DeviantArt currently is getting a little bit of flack because their terms of service, I think, have been updated, or maybe it was ArtStation. I forget. There's so much information I'm consuming right now. But like DeviantArt, ArtStation, we'll just kind of generally categorize the two in the same category for now. But a lot of artists have uploaded their works to these convenient, quote unquote, platforms that are focused around those fields. And they've signed off that, hey, I accept that this could have happened, and it has, right? So it's kind of this double-edged sword, and it's balancing on the scales of ethics. But at the end of the day, as far as legality goes, I think legality had been thrown out the window very quickly after this whole anti-AI artist movement started, because people quickly realized, like, shoot, we don't have a legal argument here, because terms of service, terms of use has we've accepted that this was appropriate, right? Which is a bit unfortunate. But at the same time, there are a lot of people who sympathize with the fact that, hey, this all happened kind of behind everyone had the rug pulled out of under them because they didn't realize that this was happening. And it's like, the question now becomes, should they have been consulted, right? Or should it have been an opt-in, for example? But then again, as far as opt-ins go, every platform that I've seen is an opt-out model, not an opt-in model, or at least the vast majority are, right? Like every time you get, for example, you sign up to a page, how many times do you have to opt into notifications versus opt out of notifications? You know, there's been a few regulations when it comes to like data privacy and whatnot, where, you know, some of them have now changed from opt-in to opt-out, or no, what's that? Opt-out to opt-in, right? So now by default, it's not checked, it's unchecked, and you have to check in to allow that to happen, right? So just be aware that there are a lot of variables that go into this. And in my personal opinion, just because you don't like something, shying away from it and not understanding it and looking down on it, or scolding it without really understanding the other side, or the other sides is probably more appropriate, is, I think, a injustice to your own. I don't know, what's the phrase I'm looking for. It doesn't do your existence justice. I don't know. That's a very philosophical way of looking at it, perhaps, or a very high level, way too high level of way of looking at it. But yeah, people need to, I think at this point, we need to start being a bit more aware of what's going on here, because AI, again, is now at the forefront of conversation, or at least it has been for a while in the certain circles. But now it's not only affecting the tech and business, now it's affecting the creatives, right? So that is a big bubble of people that now need to start being aware, and I would argue be involved in, okay, well, it's here, it's there, where do we need to steer this ship, right? So we don't crash into some iceberg and we don't all drown, right? So anyways, let's continue.
That somebody like me actually cannot train them anymore on their own computer. But once they are there, they are really they contain everything. I mean, to a certain extent.
What this means is that we can now create images without having to actually execute them with paint or cameras or pen tools or code. The input is just a simple line of text.
Yeah.
And I'll get to how this technology works later in the video, but to understand how we got here, we have to rewind to January 2021. That's when a major AI company called OpenAI announced DALL-E, which they named after these guys. They said that it could create images from text captions for a wide range of concepts. And they've recently announced DALL-E 2, which promises more realistic results and seamless editing. But they haven't released either version to the public. So over the past year, a community of independent open source developers built text-to-image generators out of other pre-trained models that they did have access to. And you can play with those online for free.
Stable Diffusion, I believe.
Developers are now working for a
or Diffusion.
Midjourney,
yeah, Midjourney.
which created a Discord community with bots that turn your text into images in less than a minute.
Hey, that's what we've been doing.
Having basically no barrier to entry to this has made it like a whole new ball game.
She's an artist.
Like 2 or 3 in the morning.
He's an artist.
You know, really trying to change things and piece things together, and done about 7,000 images. It's just ridiculous.
Midjourney currently has a wait list for subscriptions, but we gotta...
Now you got to keep in mind, this was, although this video was 7 months ago, within those 7 months alone, a lot has changed. If I'm not mistaken, DALL-E is now available for the consumer market. Midjourney, as we've seen through our channel, is available to the consumer market. It's here. It's already here, and people are able to dabble and play with it. And as much as our dabbling and playing with it as customers are also I'm almost certain is adding to additional training of these models. I think the best thing that's come out of this is the fact that it's now not a private endeavor. Now it's in the public sphere, right? We have now awareness of it. We can get our hands on it because the technology has come so far that people have, realized that, hey, if we want to continue growing this, it's going to take a lot, not just financially, but also in order to grow awareness and improve it in the best way possible, best way, quote unquote, possible. We need to get more people involved, right? Because the AI world in Silicon Valley, like the tech world in Silicon Valley is already a small circle. Like CEOs all know each other in Silicon Valley. They all talk to each other. It's the way the business world works, right? People in various tiers of business talk to one another in those tiers of their businesses, right? So CEOs talk to other CEOs, CFOs talk to other CFOs, CIOs talk to other CIOs. Certain manager tiers, directors, for example, are talking to other directors. And AI enthusiasts and engineers are a very small group of people. I mean, from my experience alone, just looking at like Amazon, for example, right? And yeah, one engineer that was specialized in the cybersecurity, machine learning, for example, would be involved in potentially hundreds of organizations as their quote unquote expert, right? Depending on how they manage their time and whatnot. Now, from a video that I do want to share later on in another episode, it's like an 1.5 hour video, so I don't know how I'm going to do that. But one of the individuals who is a investor in Silicon Valley was like, hey, the AI engineering sphere is only like 100, 200 some people, right? I would argue it's probably like I want to say it's more closer to like 250, but it's still a very, very small community that was building this. Even Midjourney, for example, if you look at the credits of Midjourney, I want to say last I checked, it was like 10 or 11 people are responsible for Midjourney. 10 or 11 people being responsible for creating what Midjourney is today and the controversy around it. Like, that's crazy. Can you imagine in the streaming world, if 11 people got together in the streaming world, what could they make? What could they create? If 10 artists got together and collaborated, what are they making, right? So you get 10 people who are super, super invested and interested in the advancement of artificial intelligence, and in this case, artificial artistic intelligence, or however you want to look at it. It's wild to think about what they've managed to accomplish with such a small group of people. And this is really the interesting part that I see. The difference with the tech world and the artistic world is the fact that the tech world is they've been constantly collaborating, right? Open source projects, Git repositories for like code sharing, because the tech world and the business world is all about kind of pipeline flow, right? What goes in, what's the process to develop it, what comes out, how do we improve, how do we continuously improve? And this is all business and tech concepts, and I'm sure there's an equivalent in the artistic sphere as well. But one of the challenges now that I've become, I've explored the streaming and VTubing and looked into artists and worked with artists, is that there's so many artists out there, and so many of them are just doing it on their own. There's a few people who are starting to collaborate with YouTube, with Twitch, with content creation, with social media. There's more and more people collaborating, sure, but there's a lot of one-offs, right? People aren't really working together for a common goal. And I'm not going to plug too much of what I'm trying to do with Project Hivecore, but I think more people, more of humanity needs to start banding together in these kind of online communities, not just for the consumption of similar interests, but for the sake of creating towards desired outcome of similar interests, right? I think there's a lot lacking today in the creative space compared to the tech space when it comes to that type of collaboration, right? It's a slightly different kind of collaboration that's happening here. So does it surprise me that it's come this way in such a short time? No. Does it Well, anyways, let's continue the video. I don't want to get too far down a rabbit hole because I know I tend to ramble. So let's continue.
A chance to try it out.
Yeah, chance to try it out. People are now having the chance to try it out, and it's blowing minds.
Wow, that is so cool.
Yeah, so
He has some work to do. I feel like it can be. It's not dancing.
dancing taco in style of Monet. Yeah, that could definitely be
The
better.
craft of communicating with these deep learning models.
But these
has
are
been
also,
done
again,
through
early.
prompt engineering.
What I love about prompting, for me, it's kind of really, it has something like magic. Where
It's
you
not
have to know
magic,
the right
though.
words for the
So this is a term that I've heard a lot in the artistic communities, is that, you know, it's like magic where you can put in text and it quote unquote creates the art, right? I see this more as art engineering, and by that token, when you're using these text to blank models, text to music, text to image, whatever models, it's a lot more like you're more engineering. You're prompt engineering. You're analyzing, hey, what keywords, kind of like Google and search engines, for example, right? If you're trying to search Google, yeah, you could type in, you know, what's the weather tomorrow. But if you're looking for something specific, you can do methods such as putting a particular word in quotes to say that, hey, the result must include this word. You can add I don't know how it's handled today because it's advanced so far and it's become so smart as far as search engine and search engine optimization, right? I'm sure people have heard SEO, right? Especially if you're a content creator, streamer, you've probably heard SEO, search engine optimization, which is adding tags and keywords to ensure that, hey, when someone does search something or someone is recommended something based on a search that you had done, there are keywords that are going to elevate your result over the result of maybe someone who didn't do that, right? AI is really just taking this to a whole new level. And I've compared this when we've played around with ChatGPT, right? The text generator. I'm looking at ChatGPT almost like the next stage or the next evolution of a technology, much like Google was when it became the main kind of driver for online activity years ago. There's probably people here who grew up where Google was already established, but Google appeared while I was alive. I got to see Google appear and become the main search engine on the internet, right? And see Google go from a search engine to this massive, massive data and identity organization that it is today. A lot of people think Google and they're like, oh yeah, Google's a search engine. Google owns YouTube. Google's a big tech company. What a lot of people don't understand is Google is an identity organization. Their business is you. You are, in a sense, the product of Google, and your identity is what Google is the service that Google is managing, right? Think about it. Think of Google as a identity platform, and think to yourself, do you still see Google as the company you thought about a moment ago? Or does that give you a new perspective? It's like, oh, wait, you know what? I'm seeing Google sign-ins everywhere. Google has like the largest analytics platform right now. Oh, they are more than just an identity platform now, actually, right? So, you gotta think a little different about it.
spell.
You realize that you can refine the way you talk to the machines. It can become like kind of a dialogue.
You can say like Octane render, Blender 3D.
Made with Unreal Engine.
Certain types of film lenses and cameras.
1950s, 1960s.
Dates are really good.
Lino cut or wood cut.
Coming up with funny pairings like Fabergé Egg McMuffins.
A monochromatic infographic poster about typography depicting Chinese characters.
It still doesn't do a great job with characters, I've noticed. Characters, hands, certain facial features is something that it definitely struggles with still. But the more people work with it and the more that say, it's actually surprising to me that characters like text itself are so poorly optimized for text to image. And I think that's because the image models aren't really trained to include a separate layer for like, what about text, right? It's really using text as a form of another image rather than the context of what the words and the characters of words mean to generate within an image. So, but I guarantee this is going to change in probably the next 3 years. And that's probably being, what's the term? I'm probably being very lenient with that estimate. I feel like once they get the image generation and the quote unquote artistic side of it down, which I think it's going to be ready by the end of this year, if not by mid 2024, they can start making entire posters with text probably by the end of 2025, 2026 at the latest. Like, I think that potential is there. Like, this technology will move that fast, maybe even faster. Like, I'm probably being very, I have a tendency of adding a couple years or adding a few months because I'm like, we'll give it a little buffer room, right? Why not? That was part of my job in planning in the past. So it's like, and it's the way I handle my finances, right? I had a buffer, so I'm always valuing what I gain less and what I lose as more, and then whatever the difference in between is actually a bonus for me, right? But that's the way my brain has evolved, or at least the way I think has evolved. But yeah, like a lot of these examples, I know the video's going through it super quick, but you can see like the different complexities and the types of prompts people are using, how the way they use prompts is generating different forms of imagery, right? The technology is only going to get smarter to then understand the intention behind the user to make it more human interactive rather than machine interactive, right? So maybe that doesn't make sense, but under promise, over deliver. No, that great example. Yeah, that's exactly right. Exactly right.
A monochromatic infographic posted about typography depicting Chinese characters.
Some of the most striking images can come from prompting the model to synthesize a long list of concepts.
Yeah, this is actually a good way to get just some wild ideas, right? Because the more data you tell it to consider, the more abstract the image is going to become, because it's trying to include as many of those keywords as possible. And I don't know if the AI is smart enough to merge, for example, like if I say, like, what does it say on the screen here? Stunning plant specimens in extraordinary landscape. Like that's kind of a sentence, right? But then what if you added stunning plant, comma, specimens, comma, extraordinary landscape, comma? I bet you those would give you varying results just by separating whether it's part of a sentence versus part of a comma. Because oftentimes what will happen is that the comma is a separator, right? If anyone has worked with, say, like databases have a variety of ways of saying, okay, there is a list of information, there's an array of information. How is that information separated? Are we going to use tabs? Are we going to use commas? Is it separated by, say, periods? Like you can define it, right? And or is it a new line, right? So, coral, new line, shabby chick, new line, family room, or shabby chic. The AI and machine itself processes that information differently, much like if you were to say in Google, what's an example off the top of my head? Well, you just do something very similar in Google, right? If you add a comma in various locations in your request to Google, you can search by keyword, or you can try to search by sentence, and you'll get probably different results once upon a time. Nowadays, it's smart enough where it can kind of comprehend the intention of what you're searching for. And I think that's where we are with AI artwork today, where it's still in this kind of young learning process. It's not even necessarily young. It's maybe a bit more child. Gosh, if I had to compare it, where would I put it? Like, think of it this way. Imagine if AI years ago, when this video was talking about those tiny, tiny, tiny pictures, when AI artwork was just a concept, right? That would be like infancy. That would be like the first 1 year of a newborn child's life, as an example. And then today, or like the images we're seeing today, which again, this video was from 7 months ago, might have been, say, age 2, right? In age 2, it becomes much more visually understandable. Yeah, it's a bit abstract depending on what's going on. But in 7 months, we've gone from age 1, it took a year for age 1, it took a year for age 2, and then 7 months, it took 7 months to get to age 5, for example. Now we might have a hard time understanding that concept as humans and understanding kind of the linear timescale of aging, but this is the way technology and AI scales and grows, right? So in, say, 6 months, it might be 11 years old. And then in 3 months, it might be 21 years old, right? Really, really starts to give you a headache, doesn't it? But that, I guarantee you, that is how AI is going to advance. That is the speed and the timelines that AI is capable of potentially advancing in, right? So think about it.
It's kind of like it's having a very strange collaborator to bounce ideas off of and get unpredictable ideas back.
Yeah, normal people are blown away by this stuff.
My prompt was Chasing Seafoam Dreams, which is a lyric from the Ted Leo and the Pharmacist song Biomusicology. Can I use it as the album cover for my first album? All right.
Look
For
at
an image
that.
generator to be able to respond to so many different prompts, it needs a massive, diverse training data set.
This
Like
is where it
hundreds
gets
of millions of
interesting.
images scraped from the internet,
This is
along
where the
with millions of
controversy begins.
Those captions come from things like the alt text that website owners upload
Yep.
with their images for accessibility
Keywords.
and for search engines.
Yep.
So that's how engineers get these giant data sets. But then what do the models actually do with them?
This is the interesting
We might
part.
assume that when we give them a text prompt, like a banana inside a snow globe from 1960, they search through the training data to find related images and then copy over some of those pixels. But that's not what's happening. The new generated image doesn't come from the training data. It comes from the latent space of the deep learning model.
So this is a common misconception that a lot of people have. So if you're interested in what we're looking at so far, pay attention to this, because this is going to, I think, reshape your understanding of how these tools work, right? This is the heart of how the technology is working behind the scenes. And I think I also had a bit of uncertainty of like, okay, I kind of understood the diffusion generation to a very high level, but a part of me still thought, it's performing a search of their data set for the type of images based on the keywords, and then from there it's diffusing it, and then from there it's now then like mashing them together. Even I was misunderstanding to a certain depth of how interesting it's actually the actual process is, right? So this is the big part that I wanted to share with you all.
That'll make sense in a minute. First, let's look at how the model learns. If I gave you these images and told you to match them to these captions, you'd have no problem. But what about now? This is what images look like to a machine, just pixel values for red, green, and blue. You just have to make a guess, and that's what the computer does too, at first.
So here's the big question, right? So if images were collected for the purpose of generating this output, and this was the under-researched portion of the technology, is what you guys see on the screen here considered your work, or is it used as reference from a machine's perspective? Because if you're too young to know the origins of computers, right? Machine code is zeros and ones, right? If you're a fan of sci-fi, you probably know the whole concept of zeros and one and binary code is ultimately what it boils down to. And there has been layers and layers and layers and layers added on top of that, which now make up these computers that we all know, and the phones we use, and all the data that's being transferred, right? But when you rewind and go as deep as you can, so like you take a microscope, right? Look at like, say, a scientist who takes a microscope, peels off just like the surface of your fingernail, for example, and then you take a super strong microscope and zoom all the way in. Let's say the deepest that you can zoom in is going to be the atoms themselves. For a machine, the atoms of what we're feeding it are numbers in a sense, right? And not even just the numbers of pixel code. If you go even deeper than that, it is just a series of numbers, ones and zeros, right? Is what it used to boil down to. But now again, with all these layers that we've added on top of it, the numbers have become so separated from the way we work with the computers and the way we handle technology and the way the technology changes with our interactions and the programs that the programs we make and so on and so forth. It's not even comparable anymore, right? Like our understanding of it and the depth that people understand it are irrelevant now. So But we will give credit where credit is due. There is still a very small group of nerds that are willing to go that deep, right? So now we're starting to think like, okay, well, the machine is going to start, well, I'll let the video explain. They do a better job.
But then you could go through thousands of rounds of this and never figure out how to get better at it, whereas a computer can eventually figure out a method that works. That's what deep learning does.
This is the important part right here. The fact that, and this is going through like a little slideshow, right? Where it's like every, 1 second or half a second, just so that the viewers can understand what is happening. But imagine that it's in the span of a split second, a nanosecond, it's already done 100 of these. The human brain could never do that. Like, the human brain works in crazy and mysterious ways, but imagine going through just 3,000 of these kind of comparisons, right? Being like, does this work? Does this work? Does this work? You do that 3,000 times in the span of like a millisecond or something, like something wild like that. That's what computers are capable of, which is why machine learning and AI has grown so much interest and has grown so exponentially, because it's able to learn that fast and make correlations and provide, statistical information that makes these correlations, right? That's why, if anyone has looked into tech to any degree, which this is a part of business in general, but, data analytics, for example, has become a widely known topic, at least in my experience, in the circles that I'm aware of why data is so important, right? Because we can analyze data, we can make correlations to data, and a machine can recognize patterns a multitude of times faster than a human ever could, right? Now, the human experience might give us the ability to predict, but AI, I would argue that machines have pretty much caught up, and in some models, depending on what the subject of the conversation is, right? Whether it be, say, the stock market or I guess in this case, machine learning for the purpose of artistic stuff, it's caught up. It's catching up. It's catching up fast if it hasn't already caught up and it has surpassed us. So it's completely wild and mind-boggling, and I don't have enough notes to really speak to it super intelligently, which is why we're exploring it together, right? Because I think just the exposure alone is going to give someone out there a little bit more insight to
Does. In order to understand that this arrangement of pixels is a banana and this arrangement of pixels is a balloon, it looks for metrics that help separate these images in
That's a word I missed.
Space. So how about color? If we measure the amount of yellow in the image, that would put the banana over here and the balloon over here in this one-dimensional space. But then what if we run into this? Now our yellowness metric isn't very good at separating bananas from balloons. We need a different variable. So let's add an axis for roundness. Now we've got a two-dimensional space with the round balloons up here and the banana down here. But if we look at more data, we may come across a banana that's pretty round and a balloon that isn't. So maybe there's some way to measure shininess. Balloons usually have a shiny spot. Now we have a three-dimensional space. And ideally, when we get a new image, we can measure those three variables and see whether it falls in the banana region or the balloon region of the space. But what if we want our model to recognize not just bananas and balloons, but all these other things? Yellowness, roundness, and shininess don't capture what's distinct about these objects. We need better variables, and we need a lot more of them.
What's funny is that the same example is actually done in audio recognition as well, right? So I'm sure many people love the technology on your smartphone that allows you to hear a song on the radio and say, hey, what song is that, right? There's apps that had done that. The Google app can just, you just turn on the microphone and it's like, oh, that's a song, because it recognizes that, hey, there's a beat. And then not only that, but it can recognize the patterns or the lyrics that are coming through and the waves, right, with the noise that's being generated by the radio or the jukebox or whatever the heck you're playing it off of. And it can then identify, okay, based on, what I've seen, and it doesn't even have to listen to the whole song. It can just listen to like a few seconds of it. And it just knows that, oh, this is that song, right? Most people never even considered it, but that is a degree of machine learning that is happening where it allows it to recognize, okay, well, The beat is the song. Okay, let's go to our song database or whatever the heck that they're pulling the data from. And then based on, say, the rhythm, right, the deeps and the highs, okay, well, that we're looking at these categories. And then maybe if it even goes as far as, which it probably does today, identify, oh, this is the words that I'm hearing in the song, then that just pinpoints exactly in like that three-dimensional space. Here's the beat we're looking for. Here's the bass we're looking for. Here's the treble we're looking for. Here's the lyrics we're looking for. And it probably is a bit nuanced, and this is probably a very high level example, but same concept is happening in music, right? And I would argue that music probably is a little behind the scenes in the text to music generation, whereas text to image generation has come faster because it's easier to get people interested in the visual rather than music, which is I don't know. It's a little different. I haven't seen quite as many music generators out there. I've only seen a handful that seem decent, but maybe that's something we'll explore later.
That's what deep learning algorithms do as they go through all the training data. They find variables that help improve their performance on the task, and in the process, they build out a mathematical space with way more than 3 dimensions. We are incapable of picturing multidimensional space, but Midjourney's model offered this, and I like it. So we'll say this represents the latent space of the model, and it has more than 500 dimensions. Those 500 axes represent variables that humans wouldn't even recognize or have names for, but the result is that the space has meaningful clusters. A region that captures the essence of banana-ness, a region that represents the textures and colors of photos from the 1960s, an area for snow and an area for globes and snow globes somewhere in between. Any point in this space can be thought of as the recipe for a possible image, and the text prompt is what navigates us to that location. But then there's one more step. Translating a point in that mathematical space into an actual image in pixel space involves a generative process called diffusion. It starts with just noise and then, over a series of iterations, arranges pixels into a composition that makes sense to humans.
Yep.
Because of some randomness in the process, it will never return exactly the same image for the same prompt. And if you enter the prompt into a different model designed by different people and trained on different data, you'll get a different result, because you're in a different latent space.
And this, I think, is part of the reason why even in our own testing of tools like Midjourney, right, you can type the same prompt 100 times. I almost guarantee you will get similar images, but you probably won't get the same image ever, right? I mean, it's probably a good thing that NFTs failed in a way, but I think with the data behind these images, there's some sort of a seed, right? If anyone has played a game like Minecraft or Valheim, right, there's this procedural generation that is occurring, right? There's a set of criteria, a set of variables that then the developer essentially says, okay, well, this is how the ground needs to be shaped. This is how the world needs to be shaped. These are the type of blocks that could happen in this plot of land, and the various plots of land types or biomes, right, are going to be scattered. And the seed is kind of the original unique identifier that will create that random image. Now, as far as I'm aware, I think the seed is only the very first generation, and then the AI kind of takes it from there and scatters a bunch of other shit on top of it and then fine tunes it. So I'm not entirely sure if I want to say it was like Stable Diffusion had the ability to you could take the seed of the image that was generated and you could try to use that seed in another generation. But as far as I recall hearing, you still can't get the same result even if you use the same seed, right? Whereas a game like Minecraft and Valheim, I think if you use the seed, it's restricted, or the variables that go in that include that seed output the same based on the seed. So yeah, I still, again, don't have the super in-depth knowledge here because, again, it's new to me as well, or fairly new to me as well. But yeah, this is a big misconception that even I had, which is just how in-depth this technology actually was, just how, in a sense, unique the technology was in comparison to the layman understanding of how the blending of the images to create something unique could be. It's not really, and again, as we've just learned, it's actually not even doing blending. It's more like, okay, based on this scatter plot of a diffused identity or whatever the heck you want to call it, right? It's fine tuning it and adjusting as it makes each iteration to then eventually come to a conclusion, which this is going to be a crazy way of thinking about it, but it's not really all that uncommon to like how the human brain works, right? Now, obviously, our human brain isn't going to look at a scatter plot of noise and then be able to identify it, but we're constantly, the way we observe the world and learn as children, right? We're watching our parents, we're watching our environment, we're watching the people around us, we're seeing what our friends do. You know, there's often that term about how, like, you are the people. How's that saying go? You are most like the people you hang around with, something like that. I'm probably butchering that saying, but like we are oftentimes a product of our environment and the product of the people we hang out with and the circles that we involve ourselves in and the hobbies that we relate to with others, right? The AI here is kind of sort of doing that I know my brain is working in a very abstract way for probably a lot of you out there, but like we do this whole pattern recognition thing in our brains unconsciously. Like a lot of people don't even think about it, right? How we recognize patterns, how we behave off the behavior of others. I mean, like I've noticed this habit that I have, and it's a very common human habit, which is like you inherit the traits of others. And it's kind of, I don't know, is it a coping mechanism? Is it a likeness mechanism? Like I never used to really say something was wild. Honestly, actually, Zabiel, you're in the chat. Like I probably got this from being around you over the years, right? Where, man, that's wild. It's a term that means something to me. And actually, much like, say, your parents' generation, or depending on how old you are out there, your parents' generation might not understand what a meme is, right? Or, you know, however you guys pronounce it out there. I call it a meme. But I look at memes as like a form of language, right? It's almost like making full circle back to like hieroglyphics, how certain Egyptian hieroglyphics had it was a visual representation of meaning, right? Communication through visual. Like we're coming full circle here, just in a much higher stratosphere of understanding, right? Through imagery, through, you know, like people. It blows my mind how people younger than me, I mean, I kind of understand the concept of memes and, you know, I partake in them, but like the generation under me, like they're constantly sending me pictures, memes, short form video. Like that's how people communicate nowadays. Like we're slowly, I don't know, words have a particular use to them, right? In a particular time and a place for them, but like we're slowly going back to understanding how to communicate better, not through words, but through imagery, right? And then obviously there's people who understand words and have a very wide vocabulary who's able to articulate the words that they wish to convey in a more concise and clear way that is understandable. But then we also run into the other side, which is like, well, if the person you're communicating to doesn't understand half the words that are coming out of your mouth, how effective are you really communicating at that point, right? Whereas the generation that communicates through imagery, through memes, right? It's almost like an emotional communication. It's bizarre. And AI, I see AI in AI artwork actually starting to kind of bridge that gap, which is, I don't know, it's going to be a very fascinating next couple of years to see how this comes along. They're blown away.
No way! That is so cool. What the heck? The like brush strokes, the color palette. That's fascinating. I wish I could like, I mean he's dead, but like go up to him and be like, look what I
Oh, that's pretty cool. Probably the only dolly that I could afford anyway.
The ability of deep learning to extract patterns from data means that you can copy an artist's style without copying their images, just by putting their name in the prompt. James Gurney is an American illustrator who quickly became a popular reference for users of text-to-image models. I asked him what kind of norms he would like to see as prompting becomes widespread.
I think it's only fair to people looking at this work that they should know what the prompt was and also what software was used. Also, I think the artists should be allowed to opt in or opt out of having their work that they worked so hard on by hand be used as a data set for creating this other artwork.
James Gurney, I think he was a great example of being someone who was open to it, started talking with their artists, but I also heard of other artists who got actually extremely upset.
The copyright questions regarding the images that go into training the models and the images that come out of them are completely unresolved. And those aren't the only questions that this technology will provoke. The latent space of these models contains some dark corners that get scarier as outputs become photorealistic. It also holds an untold number of associations that we wouldn't teach our children, but that it learned from the internet.
If you ask for an image of a CEO, it's like an old white guy. If you ask for images of nurses, they're all like women.
We don't know exactly what's in the datasets used by OpenAI or Midjourney, but we know the internet is biased toward the English language and Western concepts, with whole cultures not represented at all. In one open source dataset, the word Asian is represented first and foremost by an avalanche of porn.
Yeah, it really is just sort of
That's wild. What?
Infinitely complex mirror, you know, held up to our society and what we deem worthy enough to, you know, put on the internet in the first place, and how we think about what we do put up.
But what makes this technology so unique is that it enables any of us to direct the machine to imagine what we want it to see.
Party hat guy, space invader, caterpillar, and a ramen bowl.
Ooh.
Prompting removes the obstacles between our ideas and images, and eventually videos, animations, and whole virtual worlds.
If you guys didn't know, there's already AI tools out there that are making short videos. If you haven't seen it, maybe we'll explore a video talking about that in the near future. But I hadn't even considered, like, what if I put emojis in Midjourney in one of our episodes? What would that do? Is that even possible with Midjourney? I don't know. Maybe we'll have to try that out. But yeah. Also, it's been over an hour. This is a 13-minute video. What the hell happened? All right, let's finish.
We are on a voyage here that is, it's a bigger deal than just like 1 decade or the immediate technical.
All right, sorry, I got to pause again. So it is a huge deal. This is a massive deal, right? And what people don't realize is that I think the AI revolution, it's going to be a revolution. It's going to be as big. It's going to be as big as, I would argue, the industrial evolution. It's going to be as big as it's going to be bigger than the invention of electricity. It's going to be bigger than the invention of the automobile. AI is going to literally change the way we operate, which I think is more reason why more people need to start getting familiar with the direction AI is going, because I think objectively a lot of people can argue that there is a large percentage of the world that is in the majority that is effectively directed and controlled by technology, right? You might have some controversy there because it's like, well, who controls the technology? It's the big tech firms, it's Silicon Valley, it's whatnot, right? But technology is driving the future today, right? We're no longer at a point where the people who are in the middle of the country or in some rural area, like even they have like satellite internet, like even they can be connected. Now, maybe if they're working the fields or if they're riding on a horse still, good on them. You know, I think there's something very wholesome and very communal about these, you know, rural communities. I actually really want to go visit like a really rural place and hang out there for like a week or something. I think that'd be really interesting just to kind of detach and see how people are living in those places, because I have not been in a long time. I don't know if I've ever been outside of a city / suburb to like a proper middle of we'll call it bumfuck nowhere, right? Where your nearest neighbor is miles away. Like those communities still exist. And hell, some of you guys might even be in communities that are like that. Yeehaw, y'all. Yeah, right on, bro. But yeah. But we're also at a point where, say, like Elon Musk with his, what is it called? Starlink, right? Like a big initiative of Starlink is to bring internet access to people who live in those types of locations, who maybe don't have reliable, accessible, high speed that a lot of us, especially content creators and streamers and VTubers, take for granted, right? Like there are still certain parts of the world, and in particular, even the Western world, even in the States, I'm sure places like our neighbors in Canada, right? I bet you there are people out there in, you know, parts of Canada that where not a whole lot of people live, and they may or may not have internet. Maybe they only get internet when they go into town when they're shopping, and when they're back home, it's just there's no infrastructure for it, right? Like you got to broaden your horizons a little bit, which is what we're trying to do here.
Consequences. It's a change in the way humans imagine, communicate.
Oh yeah, there you go.
And that will have long-range good and bad consequences that we are just by definition,
man, you guys
not going to be capable of completely anticipating.
Yeah. No, this was a great video. Vox did a fantastic job here.
I spoke to a bunch of creative people who have played with these tools, and I asked them what they think this all means for people who make a living making images, the human artists and illustrators and designers and stock photographers out there. And they had a lot of interesting things to say, so I've compiled them into a bonus video. Please check it out and add your own thoughts in the comments. Thank you for watching.
Yeah. Oh, if you guys like that, you know, go give them a thumbs up. We'll actually go ahead and do it. Maybe we'll check out another one of their videos. If I like it, maybe I'll follow them. But I think Vox covers a wide variety of topics that I don't want to muddle my main or my VTuber channel with. But yeah, what did you guys think? Interesting, right? I think this sheds a lot of light that a lot of people didn't realize about AI. And yeah, I think it's a good start. I actually wanted to talk a little bit more about kind of the diffusion and go through some imagery here that kind of talks a bit more about it. But, you know, maybe we'll save this for a future day. There's also this presentation that Kristen Ziergnibil, I don't know how to pronounce it, I'm sorry. But they're a known illustrator concept artist who is currently playing with AI and training AI to replicate her style, which is like, this is her style. It's very, very creative. I think this is her style, not the AI stuff. But I heard about this through this podcast, Draftsman, which again, I'm watching all sorts of artistic people talking about it and trying to find a few AI people who are talking with artists that I want to share with you guys too. But yeah, because it's already been well over an hour, or not well over, but over an hour, we're gonna save that maybe for another time. But yeah, Twitter unfortunately is a very toxic culture for communication and civil discourse and dialogue. A lot of conversations I feel like on Twitter just get flat out shut down, which is too bad considering how Twitter is one of the largest, if not maybe the largest conversation platform. So it's a shame to see that there's such a split on the community there. And a part of me feels like perhaps it is a fear and an uncertainty that people are worrying about. But an interesting conclusion that I've come to is when you're living in the period of a revolution, you really don't understand it. You don't realize it. And a lot of people are also, you're more comfortable with what you're familiar with, right? So like the older generation is usually more conservative than the younger generation, for example, you know, regardless, throw the political shit out the window. We're not getting into that. But, you know, through looking at this artistic perspective, I came across a couple of older artists that were talking about how they were in art school when Photoshop came out. Now, a lot of people today will look at Photoshop and it's like, yeah, that's art. But apparently, I had no idea about this because, again, I did not walk down the road of a creative. I walked down the road of eventually into business and tech. But like these older artists were talking about, yeah, when Photoshop came out, people were losing their jobs because their employers saw that they were using these new tools. And it's like, no, you're not an artist. Like this is unacceptable. People were getting failing grades in school because they used Photoshop to touch up their image for an art class. And the teacher is like, this isn't art. This isn't traditional art, right? Digital media today was highly controversial in a short window of time that those digital media tools were becoming available, which a lot of people in the VTubing world, I feel are younger. No offense, guys, but have you considered that? Were you even aware of that? Have you ever heard, do you even have like a mentor who's older who's talking about this that you even like value the opinion of? Go find somebody. Go find somebody to be a mentor. And then also as far as like the AI learning process, like, okay, well, if we're going to say that AI cannot learn from quote unquote copyrighted material, are we also going to say that, hey, young artists, if you want to use as reference an existing artist who has not passed away yet and gain reference or inspiration from their style, is that now going to be off limits too? Or are we choosing based on what's convenient because we want to protect our communities, right? Like my wording might be a little hard in a couple places there, but you know, you got to think about that kind of stuff, right? I know a ton of artists. I've had work done by artists who have clearly stated, yeah, like my work was inspired by X, Y, and Z. There's a lot of super well-known artists that I had watched videos for that's like, hey, you know, even my artwork was inspired by X, Y, and Z artist. You know, I'm not from the art sphere. I wish I could remember all these names. Even if I wasn't talking about art, I can't remember names. I'm so bad. I'm sorry. But, you know, it's like, think about it, right? Provoke your mind. Think about it. So anyways, yeah, let's see what some of these chats are. Someday you'll catch my stream when they start. Hey, it's okay. The beginning of mine, I actually left the mute button on, so I was talking into the void. I feel bad. Getting closer and closer to Skynet. See, that's why we need to have more people involved in the conversation, right? One of the interviews I really would love to share, but again, it's an 1.5-hour video. The fact that a 13-minute video is now pushing an 1.5 hours, I don't know what I'm going to do about that other podcast that I really want to cover, because they bring on someone who's familiar with the AI world talking with an artist, and they go all over the place, right? Some wild concepts are talked about, and I really want to share some of that with you guys, but that's going to end up being like a 6-hour video if I talk about it. And my throat's already getting dry. So yeah, I think the important thing here is that artists, rather than protesting, need to either get involved, not just protesting on platforms they use where they've signed terms of agreements that allows their data to be collected in the manners that they have been, which most likely have been done in legal ways now that I understand it a bit better. But also, like, is there an artist's union? Does that need to happen now because of AI? I don't know. I mean, I'm not from the artistic spheres, or I mean, maybe I have like a couple toes in there now that I'm streaming, but yeah, I don't know. It's a fascinating topic for me, at least, that I love to continue to explore. But yeah, very interesting. I came in super late, not 100% sure. Yeah, go watch and I mean, I ended up freaking multiplying the video length by like 5x, 6x because I talk so much. But yeah, it's a great video. Check it out. And if you go back and you want to add a comment, right, leave me a comment, because that does help me more than the live streams, unfortunately, just the way YouTube is. So, but yeah, if you're watching this after the fact, I'm getting tired. I'm going to take a break. Let me know what you guys thought. Leave a comment below. And again, if you want me to explore a particular idea, or if you thought maybe one of the things that I said was thought-provoking or interesting, or you just want to make fun of something I said, you know, let me know. I'm very curious about the dialogue. I welcome it. I encourage it. Ask anyone who I've interacted with. It's pretty hard to insult me, so I don't mind. But it's the intention that matters, right? But I think more people need to pay attention to AI. More people need to wake up to AI. More people need to be involved with AI and join the conversation and share their opinions, and also collaborate together in more meaningful ways, not just, I don't know. It's difficult to get people together to collaborate in meaningful ways, but it's something that I really want to try to figure out and promote. And I do need help. I'll admit it. I do need help, but I hope we find a way to make it happen, because I thoroughly enjoy the streaming VTuber content creator community as a whole. I think the internet has evolved to the point where we're so connected with one another, and yet we've created artificial like barriers because of the human nature getting the better of us. it's a shame to see, because like with this constant connection that we have to one another, like I've had the opportunity to know people I've never met IRL and have built friendships over years. Like I've known people and engaged with people over the internet more than I've engaged with people I've known since I was in middle school. Like IRL relationships come and go as people move, as people lose contact with one another. But these internet relationships, you know, there's meaning behind some of them, right? Obviously, there's the whole conversation and controversy with the what was the term? Parasocial, right? Which I still have a hard time understanding. Maybe it's just my perspective of it is a little different, so I don't quite understand it. But you know, you treat others with respect. You give people the benefit of the doubt, as long as respect is given and respect is earned, right? I feel like that's a very basic concept that people are not taught properly today. And is that a failure of the family and the deterioration of the family, or is that a deterioration of education and the failure of our educators? That's a whole nother rabbit hole to get down, you know, get lost into. But yeah, make meaningful connections, make meaningful collaborations, I don't know, just think about it. Think about it. Let me know what you think. Anyways, I'm out of here, guys. Thanks for joining as always. Leave a comment, push the button, and I'll catch you next time. This is Dregn Durant. Bye. Peace.